I say, what? Ho, I am Brian. Call me the tall, cool one gardener, coming to you from Ramble On Towers, Dungeon Studio in scenic Hespeler, Ontario. This is Ramble On Radio, episode 41, the only Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news and any links I mentioned during the show. You can listen to Ramble On Radio at Podbean, subscribe at iTunes, or listen to it at Spreaker.com or SoundCloud. Be sure to give Ramble On Radio a review at iTunes, or like Ramble On Radio on Spreaker, and that way that just draws attention. Helps bring other listeners. So I actually posted on Twitter that I was doing this podcast about a week and a half ago, and then I realized the day I was sitting down to record I was going to record this one, and I realized that it was the anniversary of Celebration Day. So I thought that was probably more important to talk about. But I wanted to get this one in before the year was out. This comes from back when Robert released 9 Lives, which I have in my hand, and of course I'm not YouTubing this anymore. You can go on YouTube, go to I Am Brian Dammit at YouTube, and you're good to go, by the way. It's there if you really want to kind of sit at your computer and listen to it. If you also go to rambleonradio.com, you can listen to me through Spreaker. But the 9 Lives, when was the 9 Lives? Is that 90, 95? 90, no, after Mighty Rearranger, so about 90, or about 2010, right? Sorry, 90, I'm thinking. Let's see, 2005 it says. 2005. So this was done in 2005. It was an interview with Redbeard, and it's called. The interviews are called. Redbeard is, by the way, a DJ in the studio with Redbeard. Robert Plant, 9 Lives Best Of. So and he posted this online. He did it at the time, but posted it online just last month. And when he posted it online, he wrote a little blog post about it as well, and mentioned that 2013 is the anniversary of 30 years for Principle of Moments, 25 years for Now and Zen, 20 years for Fate of Nations. And it got me thinking about those 3 albums. Those are 3 of his better albums for sure. And 5 years apart. Of course, right after Fate of Nations, he went on to Page and Plant. And it was next year, the 20th anniversary of Page and Plant. Is it 94? I think it was 94, wasn't it? So next year we'll have some talking to do on the Unleaded and on my first concert experience of Jimmy Page. I'll have to look up the date and mark it down, and we'll go over that stuff. Anyway, so he had this interview, and out of the interview, there's a few things that come up interesting. Robert Plant thinks of his career as a very fluid thing. He doesn't consider it in terms of stages. It's not a straight line with, the Led Zeppelin years, the pre-Led Zeppelin years, the Robbie Blunt years. He just it just flows, and it's the music. He does mention in it that during the 80s he avoided Led Zeppelin. But he also points out, which is very true, by the way, that Led Zeppelin were out of fashion in the 80s. And it's really very true that after 1980, 81, even here in the Americas, they were just not thought of much. They were very out of fashion for a spell. And when they did Live Aid, it brought them back a bit, but It didn't bring them back massively speaking. But it was around the time of Live Aid, of course, that he did do a Tall Cool One. I think that was 80. I'm going to say 85 Live Aid. So 88 was Now and Zen. So a couple of years later. But there was a kind of out of fashionness about them. Very the Beatles, by the way, were also, I recall it distinctly, just based on a conversation I had with somebody. But yeah, I used to go to bars and see the bars and see bands and stuff. Nobody played Led Zeppelin. It wouldn't touch them. And the same would go for. They just weren't. They just it wasn't on. He also mentions, by the way, that, and I'm going to mention that maybe a little later. I got some stories to go with it, I think, I'll have to, as I go, I'll be talking off the top of my head, but I'll get back to that subject a bit. But yeah, the 80s were an odd time to be a Led Zeppelin fan, I can assure you. He talks about Led Zeppelin used to rehearse. They didn't rehearse Led Zeppelin songs. They rehearsed oldies. And I wrote something here that I absolutely can't read. A session in which the band joined some oldies, changed him. Oh, when he was touring before Now and Then, around the time of Now and Then, with I believe I have the stuff written down, but it was the Johnsons. The producer, anyway, and the band he had at that time, they were doing some rehearsals and stuff, and they went into an old jam up. They were just rehearsing old songs, and one of the guys, the guitar player, started playing a Whole Lot of Love, and they jammed it, and that was what changed him, made him go, that was fun, and this is good music. He talks about going back to Morocco before he wrote, before he was now in Zen. Morocco's, of course, where he wrote Kashmir. And he says he felt confident and strong. So he went back to Morocco and found it foreign, quote, foreign and alluring. In Talcool 1, Redbeard talks about, and I'm kind of off all over the map on this, but I have notes. This is why. With one musical blast, Plant exorcised his demons. This is all part of the interviews, by the way. This is what I'm quoting. He also felt that his solo career was strong enough by Now and Then, without it appearing like some kind of mercy job, quote unquote, without it appearing as some kind of mercy job. It was not a case of I have to play Led Zeppelin songs to get my music heard. He was well established as a solo artist by then, so felt comfortable going back to the Led Zeppelin. Which makes some sense, right? You that's what you do. You establish your own life, and then you can comfortably go back to an old life or to somebody else's. Artists earlier in their career, for instance, often don't cover other people's music if they haven't specifically recorded it, whereas later on they might do that. And it's just one example, right? When you have enough music to cover your own concert, then it's easier to put somebody else's in and say it's an artistic decision, Same applies for just covering a song. If your first hit is a cover song, I'm trying to think of any artist who had a first hit that was a cover song and managed to ever get one of their own songs, Or if you establish yourself as a songwriter, you have 2 or 3 hit songs, and then you go and you cover something that you just love, that's a different thing. People know, well, he's allowed to cover a song too. He's, this is a song he loved. Whereas, if you start out as a cover artist, you finish up a cover artist. The only exception I can think of is kind of the early 60s where they were all cover artists. The Stones and Eric Clapton and stuff. They kind of established the point of songwriter / performer. Before that, it was, but the Beatles, even their first couple of songs were covers, I think. Or at least very early on, they were doing covers, right? Okay. Regarding his first solo band, he mentions that, and this is kind of going to be, we'll move right on, right? Apathy and lethargy crept in. It needed a quote-unquote, quote, a bit more application from other people. I should underline that, from other people, I would say. I felt a bit like I was dragging it along. I wondered about that. That's a bit of a, who's taking that slap in the face? But also, you wonder, guys like Robbie Blunt, who'd never performed at that level before, had never been, and kind of finally hit, in a way, got the brass ring. And did he relax a little? Do you say to yourself, oh, look, I've made it. I guess I don't have to work that hard anymore, And Robert knew, that now that your ears was half the battle, this is how hard you work to keep it going, too. You know, so anyway, he felt he was dragging the band along. And he also talks, though, he liked that band. He liked what they did. He liked that it wasn't four to a bar, four to a verse, four to a chorus. In other words, it wasn't traditional songwriting. And I'm going to get into that a bit here. But really, listening to Principle of Moments, and this is what I did, is I literally put on the headphones and went through all three of these albums. Very specifically, for this podcast. And Principle of Moments, the thing that strikes me, and the thing that always struck me about those first two albums was how interesting the guitar work is, how intricate it is, how he avoids entirely the kind of Chuck Berry boogie-woogie riffs, all the standard kind of guitar repertoire stuff. He doesn't do any of it. And I remember when Pictures at 11 first came out, and I mean first came out. And I think Worse Than Detroit was on the radio a bit. And people would say, and I bought the album. And somebody said to me that day, and so we are talking, because I wasn't missing that. We are talking the day it was released, or 2 days after it was released. Or, if it was released on Tuesday, maybe I picked it up on Thursday. But somebody said, he's just ripping off Led Zeppelin. He's just the same old, same old. And what's always struck me about those first two albums is how much they don't sound, how wrong that assessment is. And I even thought at the time, I don't hear that. And the radio stations have been playing the album for a day or two, or a week or two, or something. So we all had heard it, most of it. And so that's where this opinion came from. And I never heard that. It doesn't sound very much like Led Zeppelin to me at all. One of the places that always struck me is Robbie Blunt's a very different guitar player, a very different tone, very different quality of tone. Yet he is very much like Jimmy Page in that he doesn't do the standard kind of licks, right? Jimmy Page very rarely broke into that Chuck Berry boogie-woogie type thing. And when he did, this is for some bands, it's the only pattern they know, that shuffle kind of thing. When he did it to dynamic effect, like in the chorus of Celebration Day or the chorus of Night Flight. He just hit it for about 2 or 4 bars, and it really jumped out instead of just being part of the song. It was really kind of wow. He just gave that song a bit of an extra lift. Robbie Blunt didn't even do that, though. He never went into that pattern. Never went into a Bo Diddley shuffle. Never, just did single line stuff. Did arpeggios on the chording, and which arpeggios is for those who have no musical knowledge whatsoever. Individual notes within the chord. Instead of playing the chord, you play the notes in the chord. He was doing that, and his lead solos were very one-line stuff. No double stops, as they call them, which is basically playing 2 notes at once, and that sort of thing. He really avoided that sort of thing. It was really, and that was the one way they were like Led Zeppelin. And of course, Robert Plant was singing, which obviously made them sound something like Led Zeppelin. You can never get away. Never. I've never ever heard the band where, when the singer moves on to another band, it doesn't sound eventually like their old band, because singers sound like singers. Guitar players can change guitars. Guitar players can change amps. They can change their sound. They can change their tone. But singers are always, they're stuck with one voice, one throat. That, it's got one tonal, one chapter, essentially. How they sing, where they sing, what they sing are different things, but it's always going to be that voice. So yeah, there's that, but otherwise, the drums obviously don't sound like John Bonham. Matter of fact, they're very toned back. I think he intentionally got away from a power drummer in this album, in these 2 albums. But anyways, Principal Moments. Here's the set list on Principal Moments. Other Arms, In the Mood, Messing with the Meat Con. And I looked this up. Meat-Con, or Mekon, I don't know exactly how to say that, is a bad guy from the comics, one of these arch criminal types from the comics. So Messing with the Meat-Con is it's a comic book thing. Reckless Love, Through with the Two-Step, Horizontal Departure, Stranger Here Than Over There, and Big Log. Big Log's the obvious hit. And I can tell you that he pulled it out this summer, right? Also, I posted on the internet, what would be your, and I'm going to get to this, I hope, what would be your Robert Plant best of? And James Dillon was very quick with Big Log, and somebody, I think somebody else on Twitter mentioned Big Log, and it's an obvious there. If you go to the early ones, it's probably the first one people think of the first two albums, you know. But I want to get into other rhymes. I think this album has the mood. Now, he split with his wife around the time of this album. And I've always thought this album is his Blood on the Tracks. It's a breakup album. And it's an album about, and he's also about to go back on the road with his new band with this album. And I feel he's very conflicted through this whole writing process about, is he going to do that? And I always wondered, there was never any information about why him and his wife split up. And I always wondered if going back on the road with the band was the why. I always, and this album is why I think that. I just think there's a lot of kind of stuff in there about being a musician and the stuff about the wife. And there's some nasty songs and there's some sad songs. In Other Arms, I mentioned specifically there's the line, "Not a prisoner of your hit parade." This is a bit of a standing out. This is what we're doing. And then In the Mood, then I go through So In the Mood to me is, I'm sorry, it was a week and a half ago, and I'm forgetting what I was actually thinking about Other Arms, but In the Mood has always been to me this, I'm ready to get back out, I'm ready to do it again. I'm in the mood for a melody, I'm in the mood to sing. And if you go through the words, there's kind of this anxious to get out there and do it. You go Through with a Two-Step, and I think it's the opposite of In the Mood. He's in a different place. He talks about through with the show, through with the other women, through the Two-Step is kind of a double entendre with the fooling around and the musical career. And it's the flip of In the Mood. In the Mood, he's ready to go through the Two-Step. And I always felt listening and I remember, the first time I heard it, this sounds like a guy sitting in a bar with a few too many, starting to get morose. You know those guys? I don't know why. I met one this fall, by the way. Anyway, they get depressed and morose after drinking, so they drink some more. And then it almost sounds a bit like that, like he's weighing it. He's trying to say. And when I saw him in '84, was it '83 or '84? I have to dig up my concert tickets, don't I? But anyway, the very first tour, the summer of. It was actually September. It was stinking hot in Maple Leaf Gardens. I can't remember the year, but I think it was September 10th. How's that? That's actually typical me. So, I know the date of my anniversary. I have no idea what year it was. I'll go to my wife and say, okay, our anniversary's coming up. And she's the opposite. She'll go, no, I didn't know. Oh, yeah, it's coming up. It's 2 weeks. What year is it anyway? She'll go, well, it's 23 years. Okay, good. So, hey, how's that for an aside? So he sat at the piano through the Two-Step for half the song, like a guy sitting at the bar drinking. And I always felt that was just the mood of that song. Then there's Messing with the Mekon, Reckless Love is in it. And these are Horizontal Departure, Stranger Here Than Over There is like your lonely, don't leave me alone song. Big Road is hitting the road and lonely on the road. And Big Log, Big Log is actually a reference to truckers. Truckers use it. It's a long trip in trucker parlance. So he's kind of off into the horizon. You see in the first, and see, thinking of it in terms of an album, in Other Arms, he opens up with this kind of almost a paean to the lady, and he goes through, is he going to do it? And by Big Log, he's gone, right? So, again, they're kind of opposite ends, I think. Other Arms strikes me as a why you would stay at home. Big Log is the why you would go on the road, or what it's like at home, what's it like on the road, or that sort of thing. And the thing about it is, they're all interesting, good songs. It's really good songwriting. And that DVD on Robert Plant, Blue Note, Robbie Blunt talks about he spent more time learning those songs or working on those songs, working on his guitar parts than any other. And his great guitar, and the solos are dynamite. When you kind of put the headphones on and go, oh, that's so good. At the end of the solo in The Mood, he does a little doo-doo-doo-doo-doo. That's so cool. And goes back, and the songs move around. I made a note on Horizontal Departure. After the solo, it's like a whole other song. Everything changes. And I love that about that. That's a Jimmy Page thing, actually. He loves to move the songs around. And bridges aren't just going to the minor key and roll. Bridges change the song. And Plant learned some of that, Messing with the Macon. Okay, I did write all this stuff down. It's another breakup song. And Stranger Here Than Over There. Great music. Interesting music. So then after Principal Moments, he did Shaken and Stirred, which didn't get, and I listened to that one this week, and it's not as good, anywhere near as good. It really is a fall off there. And then that's, of course, when he goes off and starts doing some Zeppelin stuff, gets on stage with Jimmy Page. Honey Drippers is in there, I think. I think the Honey Drippers was after this album. So he's starting to, he's seen Jimmy a bit. He's things are happening. So then comes, at 5 years later comes Now and Then. And here's Now and Then. Heaven Knows, Dance on My Own, Tall Cool One, The Way I Feel, Helen of Troy, Billy's Revenge, Ship of Fools, Why, White, Clean, and Neat, and Walking Towards Paradise. I have awful handwriting, by the way. That's why I'm going slow on this. And the first thing that struck me on this, he's doing those, he talked about that first band. They didn't do 4x4x4 songs. They didn't do songs that were 4 to a bar, 4 to a verse, 4 to a chorus. Now and Then is exactly that. Exactly that. Verse, chorus, bridge, verse, chorus. And these are meant as pop songs. And this, I'll tell you, before I go into, I think this is a bit dated. It's listening to it. This is not great songs on the whole. This is not great produced music. This is not great music on the whole. However, at the time, it really sat well. It was everywhere. Tall Cool One and Heaven Knows was everywhere. And it was a great, have the cassette, throw it in your car, drive down the road with the windows open. Because in those days, folks, kids, we didn't have air conditioning in the cars, and we drove with the windows open. I know it's hard to imagine, but that's what we did. Windows down, volume up, and it was a great album for that. It was great. It just really was, it felt good in the 80s, this album. It was a good feeling album. But it has not worn well. It really doesn't listen as well now. Heaven Knows still a good song. It goes on my little list of Robert songs. And of course, Tall Cool. Tall Cool One's a cool song. It's Train Kept a Rolling with different lyrics, right? But it is a cool song. And then I made notes on the other. Dance on My Own, great solo. The Way I Feel, and this is where it starts to fall apart, I think. Dance on My Own's not a bad song. Heaven Knows a good upbeat song. Dance on My Own's good. Tall Cool One's great. The Way I Feel was yawn. I listened to about half of it and went fast forward. Helen of Troy is actually another hot one, another good hot song. Billy's Revenge is a hot rockabilly piece, and reminiscent reminded me of Poor Tom from the Kodo album. And then this is where it got to me. I remember well Ship of Fools, White, Clean and Neat, and none of them did anything for me now. They really didn't. And I was almost done with this album. By Walking Towards Paradise, I was thinking, I hated the ending on Billy's Revenge. Hated the ending on it. As much as I liked the song, the ending was awful. And the other thing is, reading the book that comes with 9 Lives, they talk about this one being a return to his roots. And other than the Zeppelin stuff that gets sampled into Tall Cool One, I don't get that. To me, why Ship of Fools? There's nothing Zeppelin about them. Billy's Revenge, well, it reminds me of Poor Tom, but other than that, that's not a classic Zeppelin song by any stretch. And my note is it's a 50-50 album. When it's good, it's great, but there's a lot of crap here, and there's a lot of crap there. But it didn't age as well as I think some of the. To be honest with you, Principal Moments I think sounds better now maybe than it did then. It's aged really nicely. Whereas Now and Zen, not as much, but a good album, and certainly was an uptick in Plant's career. He went from, this was after Live Aid, so they were cool again. Zeppelin were getting cool again. This was the late 80s. Now the metal band, like the hair bands, never played kind of homage to Led Zeppelin until later in the 80s. Guns N' Roses came along and kind of did, well, very much did. In the bands at that time, bands like Great White and stuff started talking about Zeppelin influence, but you didn't hear that in the early 80s. And I hung around with guitar players, and nobody was playing Jimmy Page stuff. They were doing tapping, they were learning Yngwie Malmsteen crap. The technical thing was in. Nobody was learning Jimmy Page stuff. Nobody. And there's somebody said to me one time, well, everybody goes through a little Jimmy Page, but then they outgrow that. I think most guitar players have gone back to the Jimmy Page style now. Don't you? So anyway, after Now and Zen is Manic Nirvana, which is another, and it was a couple of years later, I guess. I don't have the date line. But it's another good one. I really like Manic Nirvana. And this is his 80s hot, and he's got the big hair, and he's got the hair, that kind of Robert Plant hair look is actually in the 80s. Everybody's doing it. All he had to do was add a little hairspray, and he fit right in. It's probably the last time he was stylish, wouldn't you say? He gave up on that one. That's what happens when you hit 50. Stylish becomes a... And I guess when you get Robert Plant kind of cool, you can say at 40. Then 93 comes Fate of Nations. And I think the thing, listening to this, I was shocked how good an album this was. I don't think I've ever really given this much time. And matter of fact, I remember hearing If I Were a Carpenter one time. And my wife and I fussed and fidgeted about the first song in our wedding. And we went crazy trying to pick just the song. And the first time I heard If I Were a Carpenter, I said, that's the song I would have picked. If I'd have even known it was out there. Now, it wasn't out there yet. I was married in 91. Or 2. 1 or 2. I don't know anymore. I can't count past 15 or 16 anyway, so just 20 some odd. But it was in that period, so it would have been after. But that's the part of the thing was I was out of the loop as, when I heard that, and in 93, I actually bought my first house in 93. Actually, I think I bought it in 92, so yeah, I got married in 91, 92 the house, 93, I turned 30. So, we were working in the house and doing this and that, and I would pick up a few songs on the radio, so I would have heard 29 Palms, for instance, but really not much else. And I do have the CD. I must have bought the CD at some point, and believe me, that at that time in life, just because new house, establishing ourselves, money for a CD was was a real treat. That was a take going out there. You know, and I was talking about the 90s being my, people talk about songs, and do you remember this song or that song? No, I was in a band, it's just recently ended, but we were doing Shine by, I can't even think of the name of the band now, but you know the song, Shine. And they brought this to this band, and I'm going, hey, that's a pretty neat song. What is that? And are you joking? Yeah, and we used to play it, and people my age and stuff go, oh, I love that. I can't believe you played that song. And until these guys brought it to the thing, I don't think I've ever heard it. And that's just, I wasn't paying attention to what was happening in music at the time. I never got Nirvana, never got into, and it's because so Fate of Nations is in my collection, but I never paid much attention to it. So I put it on, and starts with Calling to You, and very starts off with this very Mid-Eastern violin, really kind of establishes almost what he's going to do in the next year with Jimmy Page, right? Down to the Sea, Coming to My Life, I put that as a yawn. This is the CD era where they added a couple songs, of course. I would scratch that one. I Believe, which I wrote, see here you go, I make notes and then now I'm looking at it. Just a really, really bad song, I Believe. 29 Palms, Memory Song, If I Were a Carpenter, Promised Land, The Great Gift, Great Spirit, and Network News. And it's overall, this really works. And the stuff that's good on this is like 29 Palms, If I Were a Carpenter, Promised Land, Calling to You, Down by the Sea. Great songs. They really are really great songs. Now, in his book, it notes this is Robert Plant's political album. He was disgusted with all the propaganda surrounding the Gulf War. I was disgusted, quote unquote, surrounding the Gulf War. And so this was a little bit of environmentalism. He wanted to go environmental. And again, an intentional return to his roots. Less electronics, more acoustics. And my little note is, of course, this was the 90s. Who wasn't doing this? But, maybe it's natural, too, that... that's kind of what he did with Led Zeppelin. And by this time, he's now, a year later, this should all be looked at probably in the thing that a year later he finally decided to play with Jimmy again. So it, you can see the progression here that he's starting to move in that direction. I do like the Nine Lives essay says, quite simply, the best album Plant has made with any band. It is a good album, surprisingly good album. I wondered, was it necessary for this album for Plant to be in the right place for Unleaded? Which I guess is what I was getting at before. Is this sets up that, and you wonder if he was willing to do that a lot, because Jimmy seemed to come with similar ideas to this. And like I say, the violin at the beginning of Calling to You sounds very much like some stuff that was in Unleaded. But the last two songs, by the way, I kept listening to it going, what political? And then it's the last two songs. Great Spirit is his environmental song. Network News is his political song. And they're fairly obvious when you stop and pay attention to the words and stuff. Which I'm fine with. I don't like when musicians... I'm a bit of a shut up and sing type of guy. I don't mind when Bruce Springsteen does a little... The guys are in the house for the food bank. If you can, he does a little. They call it a PDA. The Springsteen fans, right? Public. Anyway, it's basically his little good works, and that's just a little bit. It takes about 2 minutes, and he's really just saying the food bank people are here, and this is why I support the food bank. I have no problem. That's fine. And when Springsteen in the middle of songs or starts describing songs that have nothing to do with politics as political, when he starts talking about, when he just goes off in these political tangents in the middle of songs, I start to have more of it. I'm not. I don't care. I'm not interested. However, if you want to sing about it, that's another story. That's putting your money where your mouth is, and I'm quite happy to decide yes, no, I will buy that song, won't buy that song based on the song. And if you want to do, if you want to do a political song, and I always have the option to say, but when I go to hear you in concert, and you becomes a political beast, I've gone to hear songs, I've gone to hear music. If I want to go to a political rally, that's what I'll spend my money to go to. So I guess, I think you know what I'm saying? So I have no problem, bottom line, with Great Spirit or Network News. They were okay songs. The messaging is there, and yeah, whatever, because I always have the choice to not listen to them. Or I always have the choice to not buy it based on it. And I think more people should. I think more people should not buy it based on politics if they don't agree, because that would put an end to a lot of... let them, if artists want to do politics, let them put their money where their mouth is, and if they don't want to do politics, politics could be a very private thing, and that's fine. I'm not going to buy or not buy your album based on what you may or may not believe. But, if you start sticking the album full of songs that are politics, you run the chance of me going, I don't think so. So anyway, that's a little bit outside of what I normally do. But anyway, this is supposed to be his political album. That's the point we're making. But it is not, by any stretch of the imagination, his best album with any band. It's not his best album as a solo artist. His first two albums far exceed it, I think. But it's a good album. It's a good, and certainly not better than anything Led Zeppelin did. It's not better than Coda. It really isn't. Sorry. So I don't buy that, but I guess they got to sell albums too. So that's anyway. Yeah, I wanted to talk about those three albums. I thought that was a thing to do, And then I was going to go through and do it quick, and I did not get a chance to make a list. So I talked about the list of what would you put on Robert Plant's on the greatest. If you were going to make a playlist in iTunes for greatest hits, and I'm thinking of doing so, what's on it? And of course, I got a couple of quick suggestions. One of which was Alive plus Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down, and I didn't emphasize. I want stuff that I have the CDs for. I don't want to have to go digging around for bootlegs or through my bootlegs. I'm talking about the released stuff, specifically in this instance. So yeah, and then Wyatt kind of did a really comprehensive list. Wyatt's been listening to this show since show one. Good fan of the show, and he's by the way, he's got a webpage called Zap Cowboy, where he does reviews and stuff. He doesn't update it very often, and I have meant to mention it before, and I've not got to it. So just Zap Cowboy. Throw it on Google, you'll find it. But again, he had a lot of live, a lot of bootleg stuff. So you want this from that from this. And not really what I was after. He had a fairly good selection, and I would disagree with some of it. So I'm just going to go through quickly, work off my top of my head. From the first album, Burning Down One Side, Worse Than Detroit. And I could do the whole first album in a way, really. Second album, In the Mood, and Through the Two-Step, and Big Lug. But I love Through the Two-Step. I've always loved that song. And The Big Lug. Anything from the Honey Drippers? I think I would throw Rockin' at Midnight on from the Honey Drippers, but not Sea of Love is the traditional one. Not really that interested. Shaken and Stirred. Yeah, somebody did get me on Twitter. I think it was somebody got me on Twitter and said Little by Little from Shaken would be the only thing from Shaken and Stirred. I can't disagree with that. Little by Little makes it. I don't think anything else. And looking at it, nothing strikes me. Heaven Knows and Tall Cool One. Manic Nirvana, Gats. Yeah, it's a different, There's a lot on Tie Dye on the Highway, maybe. I Cried. Hurting Kind. I guess Hurting Kind's got to be in there. Yeah, maybe. Fate of Nation Seas. 29 Palms for sure. If I Were a Carpenter, and I think Calling to You. I'm going to have to re-listen to this and write this down, aren't I? After Fate of Nations wasn't there an After Fate of Nations? No. And there was a beautiful song he wrote for his son, the son who died. And I'm trying to think of what it was. And I do think it was off Manic Nirvana, though. But that would get there. I'd say, now here's one of the places I would disagree with Wyatt. Nothing off Dreamland. Nothing at all off Dreamland. And believe me, it's an album I tried to like. I listened to the gym every day at the time, until about 3 months later, I went, why am I listening to this? I don't like any of this. It's not growing on me at all. Now, a funnier one is Mighty Rearranger. Mighty Rearranger, I listened to 6 months or so ago and was shocked at how much I didn't like it, because at the time I liked it a lot. So I would have to listen to it again. Tin Pan Valley, Freedom Fries, maybe Mighty Rearranger. I'd have to listen to that again, though, and decide if those three go. But from this era, he also released the Live in Paris CD. It was for some charities, and he had this band, The Strange Sensation, and I think they did those songs I mentioned, actually. I think it was, yeah. Mighty Rearranger, Freedom Fries, something else, and acoustic version of When the Levee Breaks. And I always love that. Gets on there. When the Levee Breaks, the acoustic version from 2005 or whatever year that was. It gets on there for sure. Probably 2005. And then there is, I don't know that anything from the Alison Krauss album would get on there. I just don't know. I would have to listen to it again. It's been so long, but last time I listened to it, I thought, it's not doing it for me. And then one that was mentioned by the first guy I mentioned, who talked about the live version of When the Levee Breaks that he was doing in the recent shows. He also, Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down, he mentioned, and yes, I think that gets on there. I think Angel Dance, and no, definitely Angel Dance is on there. Definitely Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down. Maybe Monkey. So that's kind of my list of the Robert Plant best of, and I'm going to listen to this again and write it down, and I'll definitely put it on the Facebook page. And I'd love to see your list. What do you think needs to be on a best of Robert Plant out of his solo albums, preferably out of his solo albums? Out of his solo years, definitely out of the studio stuff, the officially released material. Okay, so that is it. That is episode number 41 of Ramble On Radio. Go to rambleonradio.com for all the news, etc., etc., to watch Robert Plant's video. Oh, by the way, I should mention this. Robert Plant, since we're on a Robert Plant's thing, some dates have announced for next year in Europe. I've got about 8 or 10 dates announced. Looks like mid-June to late July is seeing, I imagine, and it starts June 15th, and there's a week between. I would imagine those dates will fill in. I'd imagine it's going to end up being a 20 or 30 dater, because it looks like it's about 6 weeks. And it sounds like an album's coming, too. He's been recording, and he's talking about the album's almost finished. Whether it is an addition to the album, because Strange Sensation, or Sensational Space Shifters, as they're now called, did record an album last year, did record much of an album last year. Whether they changed it, whether they beefed it up, because he since that recording has talked about, he's found his big voice, and if you listen to the Midsummer shows, he's singing more rocky, less subdued. And I think, so you wonder if they went back and redid some of those songs. Did they write completely new songs? Or are they just adding 2 or 3 new songs to add to what they already had? Don't know. Love to find out. Robert, if you're listening, call me. Because that's what happens. Every week, get phone calls from the guy. He's starting to bug me, actually. But so it sounds like, and I'll pass the news along as we get it. It sounds like a new album, plus definitely a European tour, hopefully some America dates for Robert Plant next year. And it also sounds like the rumor is strong that the first of the reissue box sets are going to come out in late January. That would be the first and second album going first, and that'll be late January is the rumor. So, Zeppelin fans, save your money. Yeah, you get money for Christmas, stuck it under the pillow, because boy, Jimmy and Robert and John Paul Jones and Jason, they need it. They're going to get it. Now that's it. This has been Ramble On Radio, episode number 41. Go to rambleonradio.com for all your news and reviews. I got the Robert Plant video, the movies, the home movies, all 6 episodes posted there. And anything else, go to the Facebook page, chat to me on the Facebook page, chat to me on Twitter. I love hearing from you. If I don't respond, it's because I'm not really good at responding, but do it anyway. Chat with me. Find me on Spreaker, find me on SoundCloud, find me on Podbeam and on iTunes. Leave reviews on iTunes, etc., etc., etc. That is it. I will see you next week. Trying to think. Next episode is going to drop on Christmas Day. Christmas Day. It's possible I won't actually record that day, by the way. Yeah. Just possible. I'll have other things on the go. But we'll see what happens. But I will definitely do something. I got a few ideas. We'll see how it rolls out. I will see you then. Have a Merry Christmas. Have a happy holiday. Happy Kwanzaa. Whatever holiday you celebrate, because everybody celebrates a holiday at this time of year. Whatever it is, enjoy it. And I will see you December 25th, Christmas Day. 5, it says 2005. So this was done in 2005. It was an interview with Redbeard, and it's called. The interviews are called. Redbeard is, by the way, a DJ in the studio with Redbeard. Robert Plant, 9 Lives Best Of. So and he posted this online. He did it at the time, but posted it online just last month. And when he posted it online, he wrote a little blog post about it as well, and mentioned that 2013 is the anniversary of 30 years for Principle of Moments, 25 years for Now and Zen, 20 years for Fate of Nations. And it got me thinking about those 3 albums. Those are 3 of his better albums for sure. And 5 years apart. Of course, right after Fate of Nations, he went on to Page and Plant. And it was next year, the 20th anniversary of Page and Plant. Is it 94? I think it was 94, wasn't it? So next year we'll have some talking to do on the Unleaded and on my first concert experience of Jimmy Page. I'll have to look up the date and mark it down, and we'll go over that stuff. Anyway, so he had this interview, and out of the interview, there's a few things that come up interesting. Robert Plant thinks of his career as a very fluid thing. He doesn't consider it in terms of stages. It's not a straight line with, the Led Zeppelin years, the pre-Led Zeppelin years, the Robbie Blunt years. He just it just flows, and it's the music. He does mention in it that during the 80s he avoided Led Zeppelin. But he also points out, which is very true by the way. I say, what? Ho, I am Brian. Call me the tall, cool one, Gardner, coming to you from Ramble On Towers, Dungeon Studio in scenic Hespeler, Ontario. This is Ramble On Radio, episode 41, the only Led Zeppelin podcast on this or any other known internets. Be sure to go to rambleonradio.com for all your Led Zeppelin news and any links I mentioned during the show. You can listen to Ramble On Radio at Podbean, subscribe at iTunes, or listen to it at Spreaker.com or SoundCloud. Be sure to give Ramble On Radio a review at iTunes, or like Ramble On Radio on Spreaker, and that way that just draws attention. Helps bring other listeners. So I actually posted on Twitter that I was doing this podcast about a week and a half ago, and then I realized the day I was sitting down to record I was going to record this one, and I realized that it was the anniversary of Celebration Day. So I thought that was probably more important to talk about. But I wanted to get this one in before the year was out. This comes from back when Robert released 9 Lives, which I have in my hand, and of course I'm not YouTubing this anymore. You can go on YouTube, go to I Am Brian Dammit at YouTube, and and you're good to go, by the way. It's there if you really want to kind of sit at your computer and listen to it. If you also go to rambleonradio.com, you can listen to me through Spreaker. But the 9 Lives, when was the 9 Lives? Is that 90, 95? 90, no, after Mighty Rearranger, so about 90, or about 2010, right? Sorry, 90, I'm thinking. Let's see, 2000, that Led Zeppelin were out of 80s, or out of fashion in the 80s. And it's really very true that after 1980, 81, even here in the Americas, they were just not thought of much. They were very out of fashion for a spell. And when they did Live Aid, it brought them back a bit, but It didn't bring them back massively speaking. But it was around the time of Live Aid, of course, that he did do a Tall Cool One. I think that was 80. I'm going to say 85 Live Aid. So 88 was Now and Then. So a couple of years later. But there was a kind of out of fashionness about them. Very. The Beatles, by the way, were also. I recall it distinctly. Just based on a conversation I had with somebody. But yeah, I used to go to bars and see the bars.